我给大家看一下啊。
Let me show you. These products for export. Due to the tariffs from yesterday, all the orders shipped overseas are stuck. So many goods are now piled up in the warehouse. If we go under because of the trade war, remember the name of our company. On April 9th, a factory manager from Taizhou, Zhejiang, shared a video showing products unable to be shipped due to the tariffs, with goods piling up in the warehouse. On the same day, an employee from a factory in Jiangsu also posted images of an empty workshop.
拆床，没人。
They say I'm spreading rumors. Let me show you. The factory is on break, waiting for further notice. I need to find temporary workers. This is the reality.
Following the Chinese government's retaliatory tariff hike on April 9th, President Donald Trump announced that tariffs on Chinese goods will be raised to 125%, effective immediately. He also stated that countries which had not imposed retaliatory tariffs on the U.S. would have their tariffs suspended for 90 days, also taking effect immediately. Trump further criticized the Chinese government for showing a lack of respect towards the global market. The White House later clarified that the 90-day suspension meant U.S. tariffs on countries other than China would be reduced to a baseline rate of 10%. This move is part of Trump's latest strategy aimed specifically at countering the Chinese government. Despite widespread complaints for both domestic and international trade sectors, the Chinese government has insisted on its retaliatory stance. At the same time, it has aggressively censored reports about the real conditions in the foreign trade industry and has continued to fuel anti-American sentiment at home. Although many related videos have been swiftly removed, some Chinese social media users have continued to post images and footage showing the hardships faced by factories amid the trade war. On April 9th, one content creator posted a video showing a mountain of goods stuck in storage. He said that as the China-US trade war intensified and a 125% tariff was imposed on exports to the U.S., 2,000 gas stoves remained unshipped. He asked, "What are we supposed to do?"
现在情况就这样咯。
This is the situation now. Factories are shut down, production has stopped, and hundreds of people have been dismissed on the spot.
Another TikToker wrote that the tariff situation felt like adding insult to injury, with many industries facing severe challenges. He said, "Suddenly, machines have been turned off. The sky has collapsed. Yesterday, everything was fine, and today the boss said we're stopping. We've only been back at work for 2 months after the holidays, and now we're all going home. I heard that most factories will close after May Day." Another post mentioned that after 3 more days of work, a factory has suddenly been shut down. All employees involved in foreign trade is forced to take leave. Another video showed a factory shut down and workers being sent home with an uncertain future ahead. On April 9th, a worker in the manufacturing industry shared what they observed on the factory floor.
关税战开始了之后，我跟大家汇报一下我。
After the trade war started, let me tell you about the manufacturing situation on our side. A factory making imported audio equipment for OEM stopped its orders. A factory producing hardware stamping announced layoffs. Another factory that exports plastic products started canceling orders with plastic trading companies, and the materials they ordered are now useless. The worker noted that some industries has seen a sudden improvement, with certain imported materials benefiting unexpectedly. For example, the price of disassembled BCDG materials had increased. The worker explained that since some imported materials still had no domestic substitutes, the prices naturally rose. Those holding inventory are now holding back supply. Foreign trade orders are now beginning to pass through product manufacturers, and the effects will soon reach material suppliers and chemical factories, setting off a chain reaction across the industry.
关税最大的输家可能就是我们东莞的。
The biggest losers from the tariffs are probably the factories in Dongguan. After all, Dongguan is known as the world's factory. There are 14,000 local enterprises, and 60% of them rely on foreign trade and exports. We don't export ourselves, but just think about it. If these companies can't ship their goods out, their upstream and downstream orders are bound to collapse. There's a Taiwanese-funded factory near us that originally gave us just 1 day off for the Qingming festival, but now they're extending it to 5. The real issue is this. To survive, these companies have to shift to domestic sales. But that means they're now competing with small factories like ours that already focus on domestic markets. So now everyone's caught up in this intense struggle. It really feels like we're being dragged under. While the worker did not oppose China's countermeasures, they criticized those who constantly advocate online for whatever it takes or fighting back, saying such people may not realize they are the ones bearing the cost. Social media users expressed concern with comments like, "I don't know how many people will lose their jobs. It's really worrying." No problem. The unemployment rate won't be reported, so it'll stay at 0. In Dongguan, it's getting harder for ride-hailing and food delivery drivers. In 6 months, many business owners may join them. China expert Yue Shan said the trade war's impact on China could lead to a broader societal crisis. Unemployment had already been rising in recent years. This year, a record 12.2 million university graduates are entering the job market, alongside many farmers who have lost their land and now need jobs. The trade war could push even employed factory workers into unemployment. In addition, many factory owners, previously part of the middle class, may fall into poverty due to bankruptcy, potentially triggering an unprecedented wave of joblessness in China. On April 10th, a Zhejiang factory owner who runs a lingerie business voiced frustration late at night, saying the U.S. tariff hikes are affecting not just export factories, but domestic businesses as well.
呀，睡不着两句啊。这次这个增加这个关税。
I couldn't sleep, so I thought I'd chat a bit. This round of tariff increases is seriously affecting everyone in manufacturing. Some people say, what does that have to do with domestic sales? But actually, it's hitting us hard too. For instance, it's really difficult to source fabric right now. Large spinning mills would rather shut down. They have massive daily operating costs. In the past, 50 to 60% of their orders came from foreign trade. Now that those have disappeared, the costs are just too high to keep running. The same goes for dyeing factories. Many of the big ones have stopped operations too. So really, don't you think this is having a major impact on us? On April 9th, a factory owner shared that several of his peers, after losing their foreign trade business, plan to shift to domestic sales. However, he questioned how they could survive in an already struggling market, saying, if they join the competition now, when things are already this difficult, we'll all just end up dragging each other down. What kind of future can this environment possibly have? He emphasized that this issue affects everyone, not just those directly involved in trade. He advised people to manage their finances carefully and spend cautiously, warning that in just a couple of weeks, everyone could begin to feel the impact. That same day, a financial content creator in Nanjing posted a video claiming that foreign trade factories in Jiangsu could collapse as a result of the U.S. tariff hike. Today, I met with a client in the textile export business. The raw materials had just arrived in the morning, and production was about to start, but by noon, they were hit with news of a 104% tariff. As a result, all the orders were canceled, and the factory immediately announced a shutdown. Sure, we also imposed an 84% tariff on the US, and that did boost morale, right? But after the slogans fade, has anyone really thought about what comes next? The most immediate impact is that many export-focused factories will have to cut production, lay off workers, and a lot of people could lose their jobs. To survive, these export-oriented factories will need to shift to domestic sales. But doesn't that mean the factories already doing domestic business will be dragged into even fiercer competition? In the end, we all get caught up in it, and you can't expect the domestic market to absorb all that excess capacity. On April 9th, a TikToker working in finance in Xiamen shared her thoughts on the U.S. raising tariffs.
首先我是做财务的，前两天我就问了。
First, I work in finance. A couple of days ago, I asked our export clients how the tariffs were affecting them. They told me that 90% of their business has been suspended, and that was when the tariff increase was just 54%. Now it's likely that everything is on hold. If the trade war drags on, exports will be impossible, and all the related industries will be affected. Factories, international logistics, platform promotions, all of them are without orders, and we won't be able to collect fees. Just the income loss for people in these industries is huge, let alone the inflation the tariffs will cause, leading to a chain reaction. So really, don't change jobs too easily this year. Holding on to your job is the best thing you can do.
Another female TikToker shared her experience with the U.S. raising tariffs.
Trump 这个加关税的动作，可能很多人都感受不到，但是我真要哭瞎。
Trump's tariff increase might not have hit many people yet, but I really have to laugh it off. Last month, our US clients imported our products and the tariff was already 45%. At that time, the clients were desperately asking me for a price cut, but I couldn't lower the margins any further. As you know, the US market isn't sensitive to prices, it's sensitive to quality. With 45% tariffs, we were barely holding on to our quality-sensitive products. But after these recent changes, I'm really embarrassed to ask the clients to place orders. They said they are still discussing, and I just replied with one word, okay. Because honestly, I don't even know what else to say.
She pointed out that many foreign trade influencers offering so-called countermeasures were being unrealistic. Faced with such steep tariffs, there are no real strategies, only the option to endure. When prices double, will customers still accept them? If not, the deal is likely off. She stated bluntly that unless a business is essentially giving products away for free, like a charity, no one would be willing to import regular goods under such high tariffs. On April 9th, an article published on a Chinese WeChat public account described the current situation of China's foreign trade industry. The author explained that on April 8th, they sent a survey to around 20 friends involved in foreign trade, asking how they plan to respond to the new U.S. tariff policies. The responses showed that about half were either taking a wait-and-see approach or had already stopped production. A quarter planned to raise prices, while another quarter were preparing to give up on the U.S. market entirely. Only 10% believed the impact would be short-term and minimal. Most business owners were pessimistic. Half said the situation was serious but survivable, while the other half said it was severely affecting their operations, with no solution in sight. On April 9th, a content creator named Michael shared that he had just returned to China after a trip to the U.S., landing in Xiamen on the morning of March 29th. It had only been 8 or 9 days since his return, yet he was surprised by how quickly the U.S.-China tariff situation had worsened in that short time.
我其实刚刚从美国回来，我从美国回来是应该是3月29号，就中国时间3月29号一早落地的厦门。
This year, we actually anticipated there might be tariff issues, so I took my team to the U.S. for more than 10 days and also visited Canada for a few days in anticipation of the tariffs. But I didn't expect them to be this high. Plus, now the tax rates between the two countries are so high. Will there be decoupling? Honestly, I'm really quite scared myself. Michael said that ever since the new tariffs were announced, his company took an immediate hit. One major client officially moved a $10 million order to Malaysia, which directly cost his company at least $2 to $3 million in losses. Let's take a quick look back at how this tariff war unfolded. It started on April 2nd when Trump announced the U.S. would impose a 34% tariff on Chinese goods, effective April 9th. In response, China said it would slap a 34% tariff on U.S. goods starting at 12:01 p.m. on April 10th. Then on April 8th, the White House stepped it up again, saying that from midnight on April 9th, tariffs on Chinese imports would jump to 104%. Not to be outdone, Beijing announced on the evening of April 9th that starting the next day at noon, it would impose an 84% tariff on all U.S. products. China's Ministry of Commerce also rolled out sanctions against 18 U.S. companies. 6 were added to the unreliable entity list, meaning they're banning from importing, exporting, or investing in China. The other 12 were put on an export control list, restricting military-related tech transfers. Shortly after that, Trump fired back again, raising tariffs to 125%, effective immediately. According to Reuters, China responded by censoring all online discussions of tariffs on platforms like Weibo and WeChat, while at the same time amplifying anti-U.S. messaging. On April 9th, China's State Council Information Office quickly released a white paper titled China's position on several issues concerning Sino-US economic and trade relations. It claimed the US broke previous agreements and forced China to respond, while also trying to make China look open to negotiations. The paper accused the US of using issues like fentanyl and port taxes as excuses to pressure China, painting Beijing as a victim. That same day, China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs declared that China had the strength and confidence to handle the risks and challenges ahead. It also claimed that global investors were still optimistic about China's economy, saying that abandoning China is like abandoning the next decade of growth. But on the ground, things look very different. On April 9th, Zhou Ning, an e-commerce seller from Jiangxi, told Radio Free Asia that China's business climate is now the toughest it's been since the reform and opening up era. He said the U.S. canceling duty-free treatment for small parcels have been devastating for millions of small online sellers. Tariffs on e-commerce packages mean we can't lower costs. That makes it really hard to sell overseas. For Chinese e-commerce, profit only comes from high volume. It's not just me. Everyone running an online store is in the same boat. Zhou Ning predicted that China would face a new wave of business closures, and foreign and Taiwanese invested companies would likely also suffer. Regarding China's increased retaliatory actions, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said on April 9 in an interview with Fox Business that Beijing's actions were unfortunate and a loser for them. He emphasized that U.S. exports to China were 5 times less than China's exports to the U.S., meaning that the tariffs would hit China harder. Bessent also warned that if Beijing further devalued the yuan, it could trigger a global tariff chain reaction. He also revealed that the U.S. government was considering delisting Chinese companies from U.S. stock exchanges and creating new export capital controls. The global tariff push initiated by the U.S. has quickly escalated into a full-blown trade war between the U.S. and China, with the whole world watching closely. According to the White House, around 70 countries have already reached out proactively to start trade negotiations. On April 8th, European Commissioner President Ursula von der Leyen spoke with Chinese Premier Li Qiang, urging Beijing to resolve the tariff control through dialogue. They also discussed setting up a mechanism to track how Chinese goods, redirected by U.S. tariffs, might start flooding European markets instead. Li Tianbao, an honorary professor at Niagara University's School of Business, said that when the U.S. first imposed tariffs on Canada and Mexico, many people weren't sure what the real target was. But just a few days later, it became obvious. China was a real focus, and everything else was just a lead-up. Observers also noted that on April 8th and 9th, Beijing held a rare high-level Central Peripheral Work Conference with Xi Jinping personally presiding. Political commentator Li Yinyi said that although the meeting's content wasn't made public, it clearly came in response to the mounting pressure from the escalating trade war. The Chinese leadership had expected global support when it pushed back against the U.S., but instead found itself isolated. Even Southeast Asian countries didn't rally behind it, leaving China increasingly surrounded and alone. China analyst Wang He pointed out that China's industrial overcapacity has become a major concern for the global market. Many countries are suffering under the weight of cheap Chinese exports and are unlikely to unite with Beijing. Plus, no economy can afford to break ties with a massive U.S. market. An article published that same day in The Economist described China's approach as a high-stakes gamble. According to the article, Beijing is betting on time, expecting that as U.S. tariffs drive up consumer prices and strain jobs, Trump will eventually be forced back to the negotiating table. But The Economist warned that China's own supply chains could buckle before the U.S. does. This is a gamble with real costs. Ye Yaoyuan, a professor of international studies at the University of St. Thomas, said the escalating tariff war is pushing China's industrial chain inward and deepening its economic struggles. Rising unemployment could have serious consequences for the Communist Party's hold on power.